the savage return of ISIS, the deadliest attack on Russia in decades. Russia endured its deadliest terror attack since the 2004 Beslan school siege when four militants from Tajikistan, dressed in camouflaged uniforms, brazenly opened fire and detonated explosives at the Crocus City Hall concert venue in Moscow on March 22nd, just before a sold out performance, massacring over 140 people and injuring more than 360 in the worst mass shooting in Russian and European history. The Islamic State swiftly claimed responsibility for the savage assault, releasing graphic footage that purportedly showed the attackers shooting the victims and slitting one person's throat, while a militant recited the takbir, though Russian President Vladimir Putin alleged without evidence that Ukraine had facilitated a window for the attackers to escape, an absurd accusation that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said was just an attempt to divert blame. American intelligence officials tied the strike to the Islamic State Khorasan province, or ISIS-K for short, the terrorist group's Afghan affiliate responsible for the 2021 Kabul airport bombing that killed 170 Afghans and 13 U.S. troops, reigniting fears about the resurgence of Islamic extremism in Russia nearly 2 decades after the Beslan school massacre, where Islamic militants took over 1,000 hostages and killed 334 people. And a quick note that I wanted to make was that according to the research that I was doing yesterday, there are still, I think, close to or maybe even over 100 people that are considered missing. So the death toll might nearly be doubled than what we originally thought. And there are 4 people who have been charged guilty in Russian court. And well, we can get to what happened to them in a second. Because I was texting Armin about it. But so obviously, if you follow Atheist Republic, this really brings back ISIS to like the international level in a way that it hasn't before, because although we've seen many highly deadly, like with body counts over, hundreds, ISIS attacks in Africa, unfortunately, if we're being honest, those don't get the same coverage, or they're not taken with the same amount of gravity as like this attack was, or attacks on Europe are. So if have been here at Atheist Republic for a while, you know that this is not the return of ISIS. You know that they've been here and they never really went away. They just went to other areas where we don't care about as much, unfortunately, as a world. But Sakai, I want to bring you in and like share with us what you wanted to talk about. Because for those who don't know Sakai, maybe you're new to AR, Sakai is very, very passionate about Ukraine and the defense of Ukraine and like all the issues surrounding that conflict. So I'm sure you have a really interesting perspective.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. If there does end up... Sorry, it's just acting up a little bit on my end. But with regards to
your robot
conflict... Oh, I'm roboty? Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can fix that. One sec.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, Susie, in the meantime, can you tell me what happened to them? You mentioned...
Okay. So... Oh, your audio just got worse.
Got worse.
It got worse? Is it still...
Yeah. Yep, cutting in and out. So let's just... I want to hear what Susanna has to say about what happened to them, and then after that, we'll go back to Secular Sakai to see if it's fixed. Go on, Susanna.
Okay, so basically these 4 militants were captured, and they, like I said, they were found guilty in court, and footage was leaked from Russian intelligence of basically them being tortured. And they showed up to Russian court looking like 50 shades of fucked up, including footage of one guy getting electrocuted on his testicles and one dude having a portion of his ear cut off, and then them forcing him to eat it.
Are you
And
sure about this?
I mean, this has been reported in mainstream media,
Uh-huh.
and then they showed up to court, I mean, with visual signs of being, you know, I mean, the one dude has a giant freaking bandage all over his ear. The other dude showed up to court with like a ripped plastic bag around his neck. They were probably suffocating him or some shit.
Wait, so they made the
And
guy eat what?
they cut off part of his ear and forced him to eat it.
The Russians did that? Are we sure, guys?
Mhm.
Okay, I don't believe. What the hell? Okay, so not all hashtag not all Russians.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What the hell? Is
Yeah.
this real?
And here's the thing.
Okay, how do
this is
go
not a the way I feel right now. And remember, guys, our feelings are not ethical. Is that I don't care. After reading the first-hand accounts of what happened during this attack, the first-hand accounts of how these people were murdered and killed are horrific. Like the eyewitness testimonies of the survivors are horrific. The way that hundreds of people died is unimaginable. Unimaginable. So if you fuck around and do this on Russian soil, do we have any like pretensions about how the SFB is going to treat you? Let's be real here, guys. The FSB, the bastion of, acknowledging the sanctity of human rights and well-beings.
right, but
We know how
we don't
they get
agree with this.
down. We know how they get down. Is anyone even surprised when I saw this? Because I've seen like the screenshots. I was like, yeah, I mean, we know who they're messing with.
I mean, okay, the fact that what they did was dumb and they should have seen what's coming to them and all, that's one thing. But at the same time, we don't endorse this methodology, even against ISIS,
Like I
right?
said, I literally just said that my feelings are not
Yeah.
ethical. I'm talking about my emotions.
Okay. But so our feelings are our feelings and we cannot control our feelings. But let me know what you think about this. What I can control is to say what I know to be the correct thing to do. And this ain't it, even against ISIS. Is that a proper response? I mean, I'm not for torturing people.
I agree on an esoteric level. I know that I
Right.
agree on an intellectual level. At the same time, I'm just being honest. I don't care. I have zero sympathies for these people. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I mean, not having, but that's the point of having standards, is when our sympathies is for when our lack of sympathies fail us. I mean, if our sympathies were enough, then we wouldn't need these global standards. That's the whole point of having human rights, and for people, because human rights are supposed to be for people that we can't sympathize with, or else they wouldn't need human rights. We would just have sympathy for them. Do you know what I mean?
No, and I agree. I'm just being honest.
Right.
Because I feel like most
Right.
people will come here and pretend like, oh, I think honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I think it's a luxury. I think it's a luxury belief to constantly be like, oh, well, this is like so, and it is barbaric. It is straight up barbaric. I'm not arguing otherwise. It is straight up barbaric. But does anyone have any like pretensions about what's going to happen when you fall into the hands of Russian authorities after doing this to their country? Like, come on, give me a break. And most people come here and pretend to be all holier than thou and oh, this is so, oh my God, how could they? And part of me is like, yeah, that is fucking barbaric, but you act barbarically, get treated barbarically. Especially when you fall into the hands of the FSB. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm so holier than thou that I don't have an emotion where I'm like, yeah, I don't care about them. So I'm just not trying to be like those people that act so elite and like holier than thou
Right.
when I'm sitting in a different country, hundreds of miles away, like so safe. And this didn't hit me
Right.
personally. You know what I mean? Like most people
Right.
have this pretense of like, oh my God, how dare you? Like, I'm like, no, man,
No, but what I want people to understand that what I'm saying and what Susanna is saying is not contradictory, okay? Because we are humans and we have emotions, but that's why we have systems that act independent from our emotions. So I'm allowed to have emotions that want to see, I don't know, maybe people who commit horrible crimes to suffer, but I don't want to be put in charge of deciding these things because I know individual feelings are not the best way to decide what to do that makes a society prosper. For that, we have systems. Even though I
Yeah.
have these emotions that made me want revenge or anything, like, okay, I have these feelings. Don't put me in charge. Don't put anybody in charge. Put systems in charge, systems that work. And the systems that do work do not torture. Anyways. That's my answer.
Oh,
We have Secular Sakai back, I think, with a different name.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey,
Sorry.
Sakai, can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Go on.
Okay. Perfect. Sorry. I'm traveling and had a lot of stuff going on yesterday
fine.
and this morning. So
That's
my
fine.
hotel-
Go ahead before it gets roboty again.
Oh no, I'm connected with roaming data on my phone, so I should be okay.
All right.
Anyway, apologies for that. So regarding this, I guess the one thing that I would like everyone to remember, right now I'm connected with Tridents
It's
against
fine.
against Tyrants, which is a YouTube channel I run related to the war in Ukraine.
Oh.
With this attack by ISIS on this concert hall in Russia. First thing I want people to remember is this is horrible. Unarmed civilians being harmed who have nothing to do with the conflict in any country, anywhere in the world, is always terrible and should be condemned. I also want people to remember that with as much attention in the news last week, and even still today, this has been getting, attacks like this committed by Russians against Ukrainians have been happening for many, many months now, and it's been pretty horrific. With regards to the significance of this attack, I think that putting aside the war in Ukraine, this is ISIS-K, because ISIS-K, the branch from Afghanistan, is the branch of ISIS that has been linked to this attack. This is a way of them making a statement, not just to Russia, but really to the rest of the world, that there will likely be attempts at attacks internationally on parts of Europe and the US, just anyone who they have long term seen as an enemy of their particular ideology. And this actually is something that I would say is linked to a broader, there's been a lot of focus on Israel-Palestine recently regarding religious conflicts. Well, religion being a big part of what spurs the conflict. But with Russia and Ukraine, whether it be situations like Chechnya or ISIS wanting to take, vengeance, one could say, against countries like Russia, just anyone they see who's been involved in their history that they consider an adversary. There's also with attacks on Ukraine, documentation of specific targeting of Ukrainian Christians by the Russian Federation. So this is actually a complex web of Islamists going after who they see as the far-right conservative Christian country of Eastern Europe. And then Russia going after Ukrainian churches and their political power because they see them as maybe not impure, but like quote unquote puppets of the liberal West. So there's a lot to unpack there. Anyway, sorry. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think you bring up a really good point, because a lot of people were immediately, I saw a lot of people online immediately being like, wait, why is ISIS attacking Russia? Like their motivation, a lot of people completely didn't have any understanding of that. And so I think people need to remember that Russia partnered with Bashar al-Assad in Syria to fight not only the independence movement, the opposition movement, but also ISIS. So they have a score to settle, so to speak, because of Russia's intervention in Syria. And then also they have a score to settle in terms of what the Soviets did to Afghanistan, before 1979.
Yeah.
And then, which is, if you guys don't know about that, like, they broke the fabric of Afghanistan to an irreparable degree. It's insanity. Like, just look up the bombing of Herat. Like, it breaks my brain. And then there was also the aspect of, there was one more thing. What was Chechnya, the aspects of Russia, Islamic and Muslim separatism in Chechnya, and a lot of heavy conflict in the 90s and early 2000s when Putin first became president. And all the fallout from that was extreme. So, Sakai, one thing I did want to ask your opinion on is, what do you think about people who say that this is a Russian false flag? Because I'm not okay. I know that the conflict that happened in Chechnya was like very complicated, and I know that there was I don't remember all the details precisely because I haven't looked into this for a while, but there was like an attack on a hotel that was really, really bad and horrific back in the day in Chechnya. And I remember people saying, perhaps with reputable concern, and tell me if I'm off base, that there is credible reasons to believe that that attack that happened back in the day in Chechnya on the hotel was actually a false flag. Now, maybe I'm way off base, but that was my understanding, that there's some evidence that people are like, we think this was a false flag on the Russians' part so that they could go in with a heavy hand and show, like, I'm the new president now, like, I have this authority and power, blah, blah, blah. And so there are some people saying that this is a Russian false flag. Can you tell me, like, one, am I way off base with what happened back then in Chechnya, if you're familiar?
Oh,
and
yeah. Absolutely.
Two, what do you think about people suspecting that with this attack?
Yeah, so I am familiar, and sorry, excuse me, I've still got a persistent cough that doesn't want to go away. But anyway, with the attack that happened a long time ago in Chechnya, that was, of course, linked to the Chechen Wars. And at the time, people, it was a time when Russia was very vulnerable. It was a time when the Russian Federation was very young, because the Soviet Union had just recently collapsed. Right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, pretty much, is when the Chechen Wars really started. And back then, just like today, even going back before that to the Soviet times, there's always been rumors. There's always been murmurings of various different false flag operations that are carried out by the Russians. Some that have credence and actual evidence to support the claims. Others that kind of just exist because there's almost this reputation, this expectation that the Russians are going to lie or going to commit false flag operations, find some flimsy pretense for whatever they want to do, whether it be staging a political coup or invading and bombing the hell out of a country that's one of their neighbors. And so I personally, after looking into this incident, I don't think that it is a false flag operation. I know a lot of people in the pro-Ukraine community who do still have suspicions of that. And that's because there's just so much mistrust, so little trust of the Russian government and military. It's logical. It makes sense that people would think that. But I think that really this is a situation where ISIS-K, because Russia is so focused on Ukraine and so many other things, and they also are focused, putting ISIS aside, on really making sure nothing like this happens in Chechnya specifically. There's a lot of surveillance in Chechnya, if we want to talk about parts of Russia that are a surveillance state. But the bottom line is, I think that ISIS-K just managed to pull one over on the Russians. Now, whether or not they maybe, someone in Russian intelligence knew about this and they didn't do anything to stop it, or if it legitimately caught them by surprise, that I don't know. But I think that this was something that occurred, and their response is to take advantage and try to tie it to Ukraine and try
Yeah.
to use it to their advantage.
Instead of framing it as an absolute security disaster, because my understanding is that the American intelligence literally gave them advanced warning. Like 2 days before this happened, US consulates were openly telling Americans, do not go to concert halls.
Yeah, exactly.
So they
And
knew this was going to happen, and they told them. And I believe Putin actually put out a statement saying like, "Oh, this is all BS. You guys are just trying to freak us out." And like, yeah. So
yeah,
huge security failure. It's
absolutely.
really terrible.
Well,
The
and
the,
what?
the stories of what happened, like on an individual level. We hear like, oh, there was this bombing and then they set everything on fire and then the roof collapsed. Like you kind of just think about it in abstract. But if you go read the firsthand accounts of what happened, it is hell. It's so horrible.
Yeah. Well, and it is horrible. And again, not that I'm jaded, but with everything happening to Ukrainians, I do have I speak with a lot of Ukrainian YouTubers about this stuff, and what's interesting, like it is horrible, and I do feel for the people, the civilians who have no ties to the war in Ukraine, no ties to anything related to ISIS or Chechnya, any of that. Um, it's a little hard for me to talk about because every time I talk with some of my friends from Ukraine about this topic, well, the immediate sentiment is we just buried several hundred of our women and children from Russian bombs like last week. So it's a very touchy subject among some circles.
I can imagine. Armin, go ahead.
No, just 2 points very quickly. But when we say the Russians, we're talking about the Russian government. I just want people to know that we're not generalizing Russians at all. We're not anti-Russians. We're specifically talking about the Russian government. Okay, so that's one point. Also, I just want to point out that once this happened, my feed was flooded with people saying that this was Mossad, this was Zionists, this was Israel. I don't know if you guys
or that Israel is ISIS.
That's like the
So,
craziest conspiracy I've ever heard.
but it's the most common one right now. It's the most common one. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I follow weird people, but Dolly is saying the same thing. Dolly in the live chat is saying Palestinians here are saying it was arranged by the Zionists. Of course, we know they're unfaithful. Yeah, okay.
Well, let's be fair. It's not specifically Palestinians. It's just all these people that are supposedly pro-Palestine.
Well,
right.
I'll take it a step further. I think a lot of it is organic and just people, coming up with their own wild theories about stuff like that, about this event. Just like how I said, there's a lot of pro-Ukraine people who are saying it's a Russian false flag operation. But I think part of it also could be related to sowing more discord, more chaos on the international scene, tying events relating Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Palestine all together. Because remember, right now, Ukraine aid in U.S. Congress is at a standstill. It is completely blocked, and there's a good chance it won't become available until Joe Biden wins the election in November.
Do you know who makes the most amazing, gorgeous, and other adjectives that I can't use here on YouTube, blasphemous art ever? We do! And for some reason, we are giving it away for free. Download them now using the link in the description before we change our mind.